Hey, it's your girl JLuv81. What's going on, guys? Today, we're here to talk about games that we like better on the SNES. So guys, a while back, I did a video on games that I like better on the Genesis. And I actually had comments under that video, and one of my buddies, Saad, had mentioned and asked if I would be willing to do one on the SNES, which I thought was awesome. I thought it was a brilliant idea, and that's why we're here today, because there are games that I like better on the SNES. There are games that are both great for both systems. Both systems are amazing. They have their strong points. You guys know I grew up with the SNES. Now I'm actually dabbling into the Sega Genesis. I'm enjoying it. There are games that are awesome and amazing for both systems. It's weird because there's like similar titles. It's the same titles, but different games totally. It's just, I love that about it. And I'm blessed to have both systems, and I'm blessed to be able to play both versions of the game. So I got my buddy Josh from Cobretti Gaming Network, and he is here to share with us the games that he likes on the SNES better. So let's get started.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? Josh Lopez here, or Cobretti of the Cobretti Gaming Network. I think many of you are familiar with me. If not, I think you're pretty much familiar with a video response I did to JLuv81 a couple of weeks ago regarding Genesis games that I prefer over their Super Nintendo counterparts. But in today's collab, it's pretty much the same topic, but it's the other way around, of Super Nintendo games I prefer over their Genesis counterparts. And I chose two in particular, and I'll get into great details about why I chose these particular games, because I'm going to say this, in general, a lot of games that do own on both the SNES and the Genesis, I generally do like both of them on both platforms. But these particular games that I chose, there's a really big difference why I prefer the SNES counterpart over the Genesis version. So, first up in line we have is Maximum Carnage. In Maximum Carnage, Spider-Man and Venom team up to take down Carnage and his forces of evil from causing carnage in the streets of New York. Now we're taking a look at the Genesis version. Now from a visual point of view, the Genesis version actually looks pretty good. You know, compare that to the Super Nintendo version. But the reason why I prefer the Super Nintendo version over the Genesis version is one big crucial factor, and that's the audio department. Just listen to the sound effects, and of course, listen to the soundtrack of the game. Compare that to the Super Nintendo version. The Super Nintendo version blows the Genesis version out of the water. I mean, just listen to the mob rules on the Super Nintendo version of Maximum Carnage. That sounds incredible. And this is the biggest reason why I prefer the SNES version over the Genesis counterpart. Now, I'm not going to say I'm going to disregard the entire Genesis version. The Genesis version is still pretty good in its own right. But the biggest problem, like I said, what I have with the Genesis version is the audio. The sound effects, especially when you shoot the web, sounds like a wet fart coming out. I'm sorry, it sounds disgusting, but that's true. That's the way how it sounds to me, and I really don't like the way how the mob rules sounds on the Genesis. It sounds pretty weak compared to the SNES version, and almost sounds pretty much CD quality, which amazes me.
My first game that I like better on the SNES is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 4: Turtles in Time. Now, this is my favorite Ninja Turtle game of all time, and this is in my top 10 favorite Super Nintendo games of all time. So this game is awesome. I also have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Hyperstone Heist. This is one of my favorite games on the Sega Genesis. This is also a great game. They're very different but similar. You'll see, but I still favor the Super Nintendo version better. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 4: Turtles in Time is a side-scrolling beat-em-ups arcade game produced by Konami. It is a sequel to the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade game. This game was ported to the SNES in 1992, with some slight changes including new bosses. You get to choose which turtle to use, and they have their own strengths and weaknesses. My favorite move is tossing the enemy toward the screen. Shredder has stolen the Statue of Liberty, and the turtles once again must come to the rescue. After you battle through the Technodrome, Shredder sends the turtles through a time warp and must battle in the past and future in order to get back home and face Shredder. This game is straight up my childhood. I grew up with this game, and it is extremely special to me. I thought this was one of the best games on the SNES, and this is still the best Ninja Turtles game ever to come out. till this day. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: The Hyperstone Heist is known as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Return of the Shredder in Japan. It's a side-scrolling beat-em-up game based on the comic books. Shredder uses the power of the Hyperstone to shrink Manhattan Island. He now has the power to take over the world. It is now up to the Turtles to stop it. This game is heavily based on Turtles in Time, but you cannot toss enemies into the screen. This game has only half the levels that the Turtles in Time has, but they are longer. There are some new levels. Hyperstone Heist also has faster gameplay and more aggressive enemies. Now, not comparing the two, this game is awesome in itself. I thought it is one of the best Ninja Turtles games, but I still have to say that I like the Super Nintendo version better.
Alright, next up we have is Earthworm Jim 2. So the reason why I prefer the Super Nintendo version over the Genesis version of Earthworm Jim 2 is not because of the audio or the visual department. Actually, the presentation on both systems actually look pretty good on both of their respective platforms. It actually comes down to the gameplay aspect of the Genesis version for Earthworm Jim 2. And the biggest flaw about the gameplay when it comes to Earthworm Jim 2 on the Genesis is the ability to swap out your weapons. Unlike the SNES version, you could swap out any of your weapons, whether it be the homing gun, the triple finger laser, or the power plasma shots. You can't do that on the Genesis. Even if you have the 6-button controller, which is really strange. I don't understand what was the logic about that. As a matter of fact, I do have this on the Wii Virtual Console, and you still can't even do that on that version either. So I don't really know what was up about doing that, because at this point, when this game was out, the Genesis 6-button controller was already available as well, because of games such as Street Fighter 2, Mortal Kombat, and any other game that required the 6-button controller. So I don't even understand why that, this was programmed like this into the Genesis version, not being able to swap out your weapons. But in the Super Nintendo version, it comes in handy swapping out your weapons, because you can conserve ammo a lot easier than you could on the Genesis version of Earthworm Jim 2. So that's, like I said, that is a big flaw about the Genesis version. Now, I'm not saying that the Genesis version is bad, but I'm just saying that is the reason why I rather prefer the Super Nintendo version over the Genesis version any time of the day. Like I said, I'm not meant to disregard the Genesis version. Like I said, it looks great, it sounds great as well. The gameplay is still good, but other than that feature that I just mentioned, this is why I prefer the Super Nintendo version. Like I said, the audio and the visual department of this game, when it comes to the presentation, looks phenomenal on both platforms. It looks really good on both platforms. This is one of the cases where both versions look and sound good, but the thing is, like I said, when it comes to the gameplay, being able to swap your weapons and conserve ammo is a huge deal. Well, at least in my book. I'm not sure about you guys, but that's a huge deal in my book, because I want to save some of those better weapons for some of the tougher enemies that you come across in the game. And another thing why I also prefer the Super Nintendo version over the Genesis version is with the loading screens when it comes to those cows. Because if you see the cows when it says "well done" on the Super Nintendo version, you can actually have some fun with them by manipulating their voices with the buttons on the controller. Pressing any of the different buttons, the Y, the X, or the BA, changes the pitch of the voices, which is pretty hilarious. And you can make them say them over and over and over and over again. Like in the original Earthworm Jim on Super Nintendo, whenever you clear a stage and you get the groovy message, you could get Jim to say groovy multiple times, and he goes like groovy, 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 groovy by hitting the button multiple times. That's something that I really like, because it's actually pretty corny. And that's the reason why I prefer the Super Nintendo version over the Genesis counterpart. Anyways, guys, those are my two picks that I have for this topic. I originally wanted to include Super Street Fighter 2, the new challengers, for this particular video, but the reason why I didn't do that, because I'll be repeating myself with one of the reasons why I enjoy Maximum Carnage on the Super Nintendo compared to the Genesis counterpart. And that is, of course, is the music. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to put some diversity when it comes to these choices. And that is the reason why I swapped out Super Street Fighter 2 for Earthworm Jim 2. Now, of course, the Genesis version of Earthworm Jim 2 is really good, but like I said, I still prefer the Super Nintendo version more because of the ability to swap out your weapons, which is, that to me, that is a big thing to do in that game compared to the Genesis version, because I like the ability to salvage my ammo, conserve my ammo, and use other weapons in the meantime, but And I still don't get why in the Genesis version it didn't have that feature. And as a matter of fact, you know, the Genesis had the 6-button controller, so it wouldn't be too difficult to do that. So I don't get that.
My second game that I like better on the Super Nintendo is Super Castlevania 4. Now, I also have Castlevania Bloodlines, thanks to you, Jay, thanks to my buddy NES Addict. This game is definitely in my top Castlevania games of all times. I really like this game. This game is also great, but I still favor the Super Nintendo version. Super Castlevania 4 is a side-scrolling platform game developed by Konami in 1991. Once again, you play as Simon Belmont and must defeat Dracula. You can whip in 8 directions, unlike in Bloodlines. The soundtrack is amazing, and so are the sound effects. I like the traditional style of gameplay, playing as Simon Belmont and being set around Dracula's castle. This feels more like a Castlevania game, but a definite upgrade from the NES games. It's a whole lot of fun, and I am happy to have discovered this within the past few years. Castlevania Bloodlines is a platform game published by Konami and released in 1994. Dracula's niece Elizabeth appears in the 20th century and is plotting war in order to bring back her uncle, Dracula. Dracula was laid to rest by Quincy Morris, a distant relative of the Belmont family. Quincy Morris' son, John, and his best friend, Eric Lassard, take up the fight against evil, traveling through Europe. Each stage has a sub-boss battle in the middle and a main boss battle at the end. John uses a whip and Eric uses a spear, which determines the route you take in the stages. So there are various differences. This game looks great. It also has an amazing soundtrack. It is one of the best games on the Sega Genesis. But compared to Castlevania 4, you can whip in 8 directions. It just, to me, feels more smooth. This is a little more fast-paced, but both games are equally as awesome. But I, once again, prefer the SNES.
I'd like to thank JLuv81 for bringing me on board here, and I definitely would love to do another of these kinds of collabs with you, JLuv81. So, take it away.
So guys, thank you for joining us. I want to also thank my buddy Josh from Cobretti Gaming Network for doing this video with me. I really appreciate it. There's going to be a link in the description below of his channel, so please guys, make sure you check him out. Show him some love. He has awesome content. He knows exactly what he's talking about when it comes to these games. And let us know in the comment below what games you like better on the SNES, or if you guys want to do a response to this video, let me know so I can see it. I would love to watch and see what opinions you guys have, because everybody's different. So I want to see. Thank you guys once again, and I'll see you guys later.